All right, thanks Julie for taking some time to meet with me today.
You're welcome.
How's your day going so far?
So far, so good.
Well, I just wanted to first thank you for allowing me into your classroom. It was definitely a very welcoming environment. I saw a lot of good things in there, and excited to kind of just break that lesson down a little bit and see what you have to say about it, and kind of go from there. So, overall, how do you think the lesson went?
Overall, I think it went pretty well. When I corrected the worksheets, the majority of the students understood it. A couple of kids who made silly mistakes here and there, the ones that who struggled even more, we kind of worked with more one-on-one to make sure they understood what they were doing wrong and comprehended the changes.
Yeah, I noticed it took a little bit to get going. There was definitely some steps that were involved in the lesson that I had reserved, and I just thought it was very interesting that the students just appeared to be engaged, throughout the whole duration of the note taking. That was kind of one of the look fors that you wanted me to look for. I just want to. It was just everyone appeared to be engaged. So it was definitely good. What do you think went well today that helped your students learn?
I think the notes went really well. I think I was going to give them more notes than I did, but instead of making them write them down numerous times, I walked them through 2 examples. And I think that kind of helped because they're not writing the same things over and over and over and go, which sometimes is good for the repetition, but then you kind of start losing them and they're not listening, where they wrote the steps out of it, and then the next 2 problems, instead of writing it out, we kind of walked through it again and talked through the steps, and then they did go back and do some problems on their own before they got their assignment.
So in the original lesson, it was your intention to add in that additional practice problem?
Those 2, yeah,
Those two.
with all the steps rewritten out again, like 2 more times. So
Okay.
we've got 3 of the same slides, but different numbers.
So kind of, I guess, more clarify, what were you reading the students, and were you...
I think now, yeah, I was reading the students, but then the fact too is kind of like, some of them takes them longer to write notes, but then when they're writing, they're really not listening, and vice versa. So this way, some of them need to write it to comprehend it. So this way, the ones that needed to write it, the steps, they had the steps, and they can go back and look at the steps. But then for them to visually watch the steps again, going through the words and not writing them, just paying attention, I think that helped them comprehend it better.
Yeah, and like I said, I think as throughout that observation, I saw a lot of those same components as well. What did you do to make your lesson meaningful for all your students in your classroom? What was there? What was there? I mean, we understand the purpose and the objective, but what would you feel students could take out of that classroom from that lesson and be like, oh man, I really accomplished something today?
I think for them being able to remember the slope-intercept equation and find the slopes of a parallel line and solving an equation, for a lot of them was kind of like, oh, I didn't forget how to do this. I still kind of do know how to do this, so next time they won't give up as easily. Yeah,
I just know from, the observation, you definitely had some students who were grasping able to identify the parallel slope, because I know they have seen it before. But how do you feel all your students were able to grasp that parallel slope and kind of put all those steps together? Do you felt it was meaningful for all of your students?
I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your lesson provided a lot of information. The notes were good. Visual component was definitely very beneficial. What did you do to ensure that students were learning?
I collect their worksheets and I correct them, and if there's mistakes, they're given it back to make the corrections. If it's something that they're really missing the big picture, then I'll either work with them more one-on-one that day, or like today I'll pull them up and work with them more one-on-one to kind of touch base and see where they're making their mistakes. But they have to redo the worksheet until they get 100% on it.
Yeah, and throughout my observation, that's one of the things I noted at the end here is, students, once the assignments were handed out, students were, variously turning them in at different points in time, and I noticed that you were, you know, then getting those worksheets, you're going over and getting them, and you're correcting them and calling up students or the other teachers in the room were, you know, working with students as well. So is that an everyday routine to,
Yes.
to kind of get that authentic feedback back to the students?
Yes.
How does that wear on you, or is it just,
It can be time consuming and stuff, but I think it's good for this Algebra 1 kids because this is like their building blocks for the rest of their math career. If they don't really comprehend the Algebra 1 and stuff, they're going to struggle moving forward. And I find that by me turning them back, I used to correct them and turn them back the next day, but me correcting them that same day or whatever and turning them back and making them get 100%, that there's more of them that are actually making an effort to do well on them so they don't have to keep redoing the worksheet.
yeah, I think one of the things that I noted here in the observation too is when we talk about just like classroom routines, I noticed that students knew right where to go to turn in their assignments. They got called up, there was no, I'm not coming up,
Yeah.
there was no, you know, everything was very cordial, you know, the routine was definitely set. You know, I noticed, you know, one student got called up and he got called up multiple times. Was it just, what was that student particularly missing? What concept was he missing?
He likes to not pay attention during notes and he thinks that he knows what he's doing. And so in a way by him getting called up, he's kind of getting shut down and we kind of had that conversation of, you know, you're rushing through this, you think you know what you're doing, you think you don't need to pay attention, blah, 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 you know, but when you're redoing a worksheet 5 times, you're truly not getting it and you need to slow down and you need to pay attention. And so he's a tough case that I'm still working on trying to get him to follow the directions and do what he's supposed to do when he's supposed to do and not to rush through his assignment.
What about those students who, so you have this student who was rushing through assignment, what about the students, I mean, I noticed throughout the observation, once it went into like the independent work time, the class broke up into like specific groups, you know, they were allowed to work in groups. How about those kids that really don't fit into a group, are kind of average, they're not, you know, they weren't getting help by like a team teacher or a paraprofessional? How are you, you know, ensuring that those students are learning their material? Granted, I know you're giving, you know, you're going through the worksheets and that material and stuff, but do you feel that they are part of that classroom environment as well, or are they kind of lost in the middle sometimes?
I do, because if I decide to throw them in a group, they work in the group. The majority of them that are working by themselves want to work by themselves. They prefer to work by themselves, whether it's just they want to make sure they understand the material or it's they don't want the distraction or whatever it is. But, you know, if I see them sitting there by themselves and they're kind of staring off into space and look like they're struggling, I'll make sure to be like, hey, you know, Ashante, how are you doing? Like, do you need help? Are you okay? And, you know, and I kind of, so she kind of knows I'm still watching, and so she's not just sitting there and nothing.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, just from my experience, I think that's important as well. You know, it's easy to lose track of those kids, you know, especially in a big classroom setting.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, given the classroom environment, given the routines that are set in place, I think you've done a good job with that.
Thank you.
I also noticed that, you know, when the assignments were handed out, that you had, there was a student that you told only to do, not do all the problems. How did you come to that decision? I know, you know, we use the word differentiation. How?
Because with a prior assignment, I knew he understood it, but he has slower processing skills. So for somebody who can take 5 minutes to do one problem, it takes him 15 minutes to do a problem. He's just got that slower pace, he's really got to comprehend it, and I know that if I cut them down, that he won't be overwhelmed going, oh my god, I have all these problems, where he'll only do those few he needs to do, and he'll be able to get it done in the time instead of seeing everybody else getting done and he's still not even halfway through. So
how do you feel he dealt with that? And he deals with that. It sounds like it's an everyday routine for him, or just.
I think he appreciated it, yeah.
Okay.
And I noticed, and again, he wasn't rushing through to try to get the worksheet done. He spent more quality time on the few assignments he had, and with just those few assignments, I could still tell that he mastered it. He knew what he was doing from the worksheet.
Okay. Yeah. You know, so I just out of curiosity, how did the next lesson go for that day? I know it was parallel one day, and then you were going to be transitioning to perpendicular. How?
It actually went really well. It's the ones that got it, and there was a few that didn't, so I'm going to touch base with them today, but it was the same exact steps, and said the slope was just one little step different, and when they were kind of like, oh my god, you know, seeing the notes again, and then they're like, well, this is the same as we did the other day, and I'm like, yep. So I think they were kind of like, oh, piece of cake, got this, and they actually did very well. Like, there was probably half of them that got 100% right away on their worksheet.
Oh, that's good. I remember being, you know, in my days in the classroom, I had that correlation parallel to go to perpendicular and throwing you know, that opposite reciprocal. I can remember it was definitely challenging for a lot of the students. Well, hey, I appreciate the opportunity for allowing me into your classroom, and you know, I definitely saw a lot of good things. You know, moving forward, what do you feel, you know, one thing that I noticed as, you know, a couple students had finished their work early, and there was about 8 minutes to go in the class. Do you ever incorporate any type of like exit ticket or something to kind of ensure that the students, you know, besides the worksheet, any type of exit ticket to kind of close out the lesson at the end of the day?
Nope, never
Okay.
have.
And is there a reason for that, or?
I guess I feel like because I don't need an exit ticket because I've already seen my curricular worksheets that they understand the material, so why make them do more work when I already have the proof in front of me that they got this?
Yeah, and you know, I think by giving that authentic feedback from those worksheets is definitely, you know, definitely a good thing. How about in terms of, do you, from like I noticed that the students were working in groups. Do you ever differentiate those groups and do different pairings of, because it looked like they kind of went with the people they were comfortable with.
No, I let them kind of pick who they want, but if they start not getting their work done, or if I find they're copying or whatever, then I will separate them and put them in different groups or make them work by themselves. So. Are your lessons typically stand and deliver? Do you ever have any type of movement involved in your lessons, or? Very rarely movement in the lessons, because with those type of kids' movements, they get off track so easy, and there's issues and there's problems, and it's a big mess.
Yeah, you seem like a very, you know, procedural, routine type of person, and you know, I think, and developing that environment in your classroom has paid dividends. So I definitely appreciate, you know, the time and effort you've put into to build that classroom environment. So,
Thanks.
yeah, well, you know, that's all I have, and we'll kind of end it from there.